How do you go about prepping in the Caribbean with everything that's going on in the world? Making a move to somewhere where you can live a slower life, where the environment is a little bit more hospitable, might be something you're considering. And if you are, I have Fastina, who is just one of the most amazing women that I've ever virtually met, who's in Jamaica, just making awesome things happen. You have this movement to build a space for single mothers, but how did you embrace the whole idea of living off grid?
I just, the off-grid thing just kind of happened. That was never my intention. I did want my property to be like self-sufficient, but I never like knew the word off-grid. Like, 90% of the world lives this way. It's such a novelty in the first world we use that word, right? We have this new fancy word that describes it. But that just happened, and I'm gonna say no coincidence because I needed these lessons in order to do the bigger work, which was to build this eco retreat. And also, when I got here, that wasn't my intention to build an eco retreat either. It
Oh,
was just to
wow.
build a healing space for retreats, like not homes where families can come and experience nature. Like, none of that happened. It was as I was living my truth, I started to see how it resonated with other women, and especially women like me, and then I realized, oh yeah, in this space, you don't really see women like me. Like, even if you see a woman of color, she's usually married and has a child. It's not some woman that just like jumps up from New York and then moves their children and they're living in the jungles of Jamaica. So I had to really first acknowledge that, like, that was kind of cool. And and once I accepted that, like, I could be some kind of a maverick in that sense, I was just like, okay. And every time I had clients, which I do coaching for people who want to have this type of lifestyle, whether it be semi-permanent or permanent, I teach you how to go about finding lodging, land, how to prep, even mentally, emotionally, all the things that you need that I found out over a course of 7 years, and even learning through my mentor who's been off grid for 40 years. But yeah, this wasn't my intention at all. I just adjusted. And like
Wow.
many ways, I had learned to adjust in New York to everything. So I just applied it here, and it was just completely a different world. And it was okay with me because it was a simpler life. I didn't have stress. So it didn't feel crazy. It was just different.
Right.
And yeah, I just adjusted.
But you said that you grew up in Kingston. So as a little girl, did you ever envisage yourself, okay, this is going to be the life for me. I'm going to be out in the
No,
bush. I'm
sir.
going to put.
No way. No way. I like to get my hair done. I like to wear makeup and pretty dresses. I want to wear high heels. And if I wear high heels, they were going to sink into the dirt. But every summer, my mom would send me to the country. And my great grandparents had a compound. And so all the children, whether you were in Germany, England, a lot of us came from Kingston and all over Jamaica, we would all be there, at least in that age group, right? Because it continued up until to the 90s. Actually, it's just our kids that aren't going there now because the great grandparents have passed away and nobody wants to be in the country. So being in the country, I kind of always been fascinated with the mountains and going in the bush. And as a little girl, they wouldn't allow me to because they say bush is a dangerous space for a girl. But being in Jamaica also, everywhere you live, you see mountains. I always lived by a mountain. So one summer I got to go to my dad's mother, my grandmother. She lived in Bull Bay, and she literally lived on top of a hill.
Wow.
And my grandmother, because it was her hill, I could go explore. And I would build huts. I'm not surprised I live in a cabin now. I'm like, why is any of this shocking to you? All summer, for like 3 summers, I tried building a cabin as a kid. As a kid. And then I would go hiking. I didn't know it was called hiking. I would just go walk because I would follow this huge water pipe. And then when I would get to a certain point, the highest point, I could see Cuba. But at the time, I didn't know it was Cuba.
Wow.
So all my like dreams of trying to travel, and I'm like, this is cool. And I would be some really cool spots, and the birds would follow me, and just really cool stuff would happen in the bush. And one time I saw actually a green goat. Nobody believed me to this day, green or blue. It was bluish green. And I told my sister, you got to come with me and I show you these things that happen in the woods. But when she came, she wouldn't see it. So that's when I realized maybe I'm different. Then I went to Ghana. This lady called me a mermaid, and she said, you're a fairy. You're not the same like everybody else. And I was like, she's right. But I've always just loved being there. Even if it was for a short period of time, I just never envisioned myself living there. I just
Wow.
always like, oh, I'm going to get a beach house. I'm going to get a house in the mountains. that was just something I always said.
Yeah. And do you have maroon heritage?
Yes,
Right.
yes. Um, on my dad's side, it's through the Bogles. We're
Okay.
descendants of Paul Bogle. But nobody knows anything. Nobody talked about it. As I'm back in Jamaica now and learning the history, I can understand why no one really talks about it. Like the Maroon history and Jamaican history, so it's wild. But yes, that is a part of who I am. So I guess also even just restudying Paul Bogle and his lineage, I like actually have a lot in common with him. I'm stubborn. I like I just be going like hothead sometimes. How he just like, nah, this is how it's gotta be. I'm gonna do this. And then I look at my dad or my mom and I'm like, yeah, they're really religious. That was never for me, you know? So yeah, that is, and I'm still exploring it. It's been very interesting time to be a Maroon in Jamaica now.
Yeah. And I just think across the Caribbean, there is this history, this lineage of needing to be elsewhere. And the idea, I mean, absolutely the whole of grid, the prepping thing, it's awesome in the fact that there's the internet and you can find out what you want. But to understand that like this has been part of the way in which we have survived. So to see it as something that's exceptionally foreign, we don't need to other ourselves that way. There's a lot that we can draw on that lets us know that at times this is necessary. So I love the way in which you're kind of like closing that loop, like it's happened and you're kind of bringing it
And
back.
I think everyone can do that. There's something that happens outside of like my family lineage. Something happens when you reconnect with nature.
Mm.
There's an ancestral knowledge that's dug up that you just, it's annoying when you're there sometimes. Like once I forgot what it was. I was itching or something. Something happened to my foot. And I was like, oh, man, I wish I could find the right bush to do this. And literally when something just said, look up. I look up and it was this bush, and I was like, wait a minute, isn't that one for rashes? I don't know how I remembered that. And I just put it on and it worked. So some things are just gonna come flooding back to you. Some things you have to relearn. But the point is just to go for it. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to, like I said, have to be something permanent, but making that reconnection with nature is vital for all of us. Start listening to trees. When you see a tree, talk to it, hug it. These mother trees talk back to you. Like trees speak telepathically. It's been proven scientifically. You're not a hippie. You're not crazy. Like these are ancestral knowledge that we have, and we now get greater access to it once we allow ourselves to be in nature.
Right. Yeah. You have to make that first step. Once you take that first step, yeah, then the ball starts rolling. And so, I mean, I think it's one of living off grid, tiny house, cabins. I mean, it sounds so Instagrammable, right? You can just imagine the Pinterest board with 1,000 pins, but yet you're no closer to actually making it happen. And I think what you do, the fact that you offer coaching really gives folks a practical way to kind of start putting it into action. But so that folks have an understanding of like what that journey looks like, are there sort of steps that you advise people to take or questions that they need to answer? Like, what's the overview for understanding how you might flow through that journey of becoming
I always
self-sufficient
tell
or
people the
offering?
first step is to ask yourself why you think you would want to do something like this. And it's not a quick question to answer in 5 minutes. Literally journal it out. That's my first assignment with every client. And that's the blueprint. Like if everything worked out perfectly, what would it look like? What would it feel like? Because if you're not living in that feeling and in that dream, why are you bothering? Because then
Mm.
you're just going to be living in someone else's. What does that look like for you? And this is why when people are like, oh, what do you do? And how do you do that? I'm like, bro, don't necessarily try to duplicate what I do, because my tolerance and my negotiables are going to be different from yours. So create that vision and like make it very, very clear why you want to do this. And with the whys, then we have a blueprint to start working off, and what it feels like and what it looks like. And that's where we can go from there. I think that's the most important part. The other thing is doing shadow work before you start doing anything else. Do some shadow work, because these demons gonna show up. That's gonna tell you you can't do something. Why are you even trying to do this? This is stupid. You know, you ain't good enough. Who do you think you are? You're an imposter. All those things that will show up, we're gonna need to knock those out. So we're gonna go do some work. some inner work real quick, and then come back to the drawing board. So that's definitely the start. A lot of people don't like to hear that. They think it's gonna be
Yeah.
like, oh, go get a generator and some
Right.
solar panels. Nah,
Yeah.
son.
They just want the Amazon shopping list. Click it, buy it. Cool,
Yeah,
I'm
let's
off.
create the preppers list and how to can. And all those things can happen as you're doing like the work. You can still be on Amazon and watching the videos on YouTube of people and taking notes. But that work, because again, like I said originally, when you are out there on your own, you're just there with yourself. There's no escaping you. So whatever you were trying to suppress, it's gonna show up. It's gonna show up in your attitude. It's gonna show up in your interactions with people, and it's gonna be showing up in ways that you don't even know. Like you'll get feedback from the world, and sometimes you won't be able to take it because you think you're coming from another place, right? Because that wasn't your intention. But how did your message or whatever you want land? Why is it that you can't get anything done? Do you have a negative mindset? Like, so yeah, shadow work is very important.
What you're speaking to really, it's that truth of laying the foundations. Like the foundations are ultimately wherever you are, whatever your budget, it's just going to be you. And unless you got you right, everything else there's a potential that it might not sit the way that you want it to. So doing the
Yeah,
hard
because
work.
my place isn't where I wanted it to be yet. I have very high standards as far as my living and all this other stuff. And there are things that I would love, but I don't have it. But if I didn't have the right mindset, I would be defeated already. I would have given up. I can't stand mosquitoes. But if and things don't move quickly as I'm used to, like New York. But then again, no one moves like New York. But I'm just saying it's not the same pace. So I would have lost my way already had I not learned how to be still and like question, like, what are you feeling right now? Why are you feeling like this? And is it real? Like, you know, like, yeah, you feel it, but like, is it really going to affect so and so? So that internal dialogue and learning how to, and just gaining the tools really for those moments, those difficult moments is going to be so helpful out here because again, things slow down, it moves slowly, and you're going to have to learn ways and coping skills until you get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And how have you
If not, you're going to
adjusted?
be in this.
Sorry,
Say it
how have you
again.
adjusted to living slowly? Because again, the slow life sounds really sexy. It looks really pretty, but it can be like it can be challenging at times. How have you adjusted to the slow life, to living slowly?
Um, I've adjusted with many things. Like I've adjusted about not being concerned about what I look like anymore. I don't even have a mirror there. Can you believe I don't have a mirror for
Wow,
one
that's
year?
you don't need it though. You're
That's so
gorgeous.
crazy. It's crazy to me. Oh, thanks. So I stopped worrying about like how I presented myself to the world. Part of it too, sometimes I question, am I trying to hide from the world? But no, I just really just wanted to show up and not let this and this define anything or what it was that I was trying to accomplish, you know? And I needed, maybe it's my ADHD, but I had to put all my focus into completing the project. And going to the salon was not a priority. Like no one's gonna see me. I'd be out here by myself with my children. Nobody's gonna see me. No neighbors, nothing. And if that once I was able to free that up, that felt good. What other adjustments as far as time? It still gets to me. The workmen not completing tasks on time. I was supposed to have benches done already so that we can do stuff with Omoela already. And, you know, I went back and only 3 benches were done. And I just, you know, I just have to be like, okay, fine. It's not a time yet. I was right because a hurricane came. It's just learning to release control, really, you know, having to take on this masculine role of both mom and dad, being a single parent. I think that's has been one of my most difficult things, was learning how to relinquish control, and especially things that I cannot control. So I guess I've adopted my Jamaican stance, which is like, don't worry, be happy. Everything easy, man. Literally everything all right. Like
Yeah.
when it's gonna happen, it will happen. So I just trust divine timing now. And it's a struggle at times, but I'm doing it. It's
Yeah.
sometimes it's minute to minute and reminding yourself of that, literally.
No, definitely. For me in Grenada, it's been painful at times. I'm like, how can it be so slow? But I'm like, no matter how loud I shout, no matter how it's not going to change. So am I going to
No,
like have a hissy
no,
fit
no,
or just
no. They care not, honey. And then you'll have a day where you make 1 year's progress. So then I realized, oh, maybe this whole situation is a mirror of myself, right? Because I do the same thing. Some days it will, if I have a project to do, and it might be the ADHD, it will take me sometimes months to just do something simple. But when I do it, I can write a whole novel when I finally get the strength. And then that's when I realized in all things, divine timing is what's important. Another thing too, when I was doing all the shadow work, I would do these workshops, and there was this one course I took, and it was about leadership, and it was a 90-day workshop, and the goal of this workshop was every dream you ever had, you had to write down, and then you were provided life coaches to help you make them happen in 3 months.
Wow.
I was so surprised by all the things that had taken me years to even say. Because even like this dream of like Maroon Bubble, it had been in my head since I was 16, but I finally could say it. And then I started creating, they gave me the tools, and like learned the tools about like creating strategies around like making it happen. That's why I ended up on Instagram. I never had a social media account until COVID started. That wasn't my thing. And then I became obsessed. I'm like, well, then if I'm on it, I had to figure out how this thing works, because that's how I am. So I'm like, I started, I went to YouTube University to learn like, how do I make the algorithm? Because I know they're not favorable to people who look like me, worse the content that I'm going to have here. And to be honest, I didn't have a full direction yet. At first, I was just showing myself, but I was never comfortable with it. But that was a part of my assignment with the workshop, was to put myself out there and to be more open. And it was through that process that I've been able to meet lots of people like, oh my God, last week I was at someone's house. I did some on New York-ish that I never did in New York, which is like you talk to somebody that you met on the internet, like it was Craigslist. It's like, yo, I'm gonna come to this house and I'm gonna see if this house is good for me and I'm gonna come live with you. I did that in Jamaica. I went to the house. The house wasn't for me. So I only stayed with her for the weekend. But it was a complete stranger, that I met online because she happened to have transplanted from New Orleans and she had children as well. And so I think remaining open with discernment is the key.
Yeah. And for me as well, like I love what you do, but what's also been lovely is just watching you blow up. So the idea that you weren't on social media at the start of the pandemic, and now you got what, like 101,000 followers
And
on
they blocking me,
Instagram.
girl, because I be getting thousands of people every week and they don't change the number. Matter of fact, this morning they brought it back down to 100, and then I hit them up because I always take pictures of all the people following, and then they brought it back up to 1. But I'm way past that.
Wow.
And it only bothers me because I'm really curious how far this thing could have gone. But they put a cap on me somehow. But I'm not gonna stop.
But
It's
either
still
like
resonating,
it's blowing
and
up.
that's what I'm gonna keep
Whatever
doing.
the number, it's blowing up. There's clearly a demand. It's clearly resonating with you. And you're on TikTok too, right?
I've given TikTok a break.
Okay.
That's what gave me the confidence though to really work on the IG. And TikTok, the people support you over there. That's where I was able to do the most of my fundraising. But I just feel like I don't have enough to say right now on TikTok because it's so demanding. And I really need to focus. So I can only focus on one thing at a time. So I prioritize this. And they have me an account warning or something for some bizarre reason. Because I showed my kids, they jumped out the pool and they were doing this. And apparently that's bad. Wow. I don't know. So I've given that a rest. And I feel like when I have something profound to say, I'll return, or once I'm doing a project again, because I kind of understand what TikTok wants from me. And that's a part of it too, for everyone who's here and wanting to grow and have their message be heard. Be clear about who your audience are and speak to them and give them what it is they want. It's if a lot of people come out here, and it's same with yoga instructors and all kind of people, and they literally are just practicing for themselves. So my goal is really to provide service. Like, I'm here to serve. And so if I'm going to serve, what is it that you want? I have to give you what you want.
Yeah, well, no, I've loved talking to you, and I just think you inspire me, and I'm not even doing it yet, but I will, I will. But even while I'm on the fence, I just know that what you're doing is just relevant to so many people, and to have a direct channel where you can see the amazing Instagram posts and follow your progress and book sessions with you and contribute to helping it happen for others. I just think it's so important. And while these platforms are here and while we still have time before everything just goes completely crazy, like let's make those connections. Let's like empower each
Let's
other,
build
because it's
community. And that's what it's grown into for me, is that I realized, oh, I'm doing this because I want a community to belong to. You know, it just, can you believe that? It just dawned on me. The word for it came to me, but I could see how my actions was always about that. And I was like, yeah, I do want a community of like-minded people. I'm not someone asked me, are you creating a cult? Like, I'm not interested in creating a cult, but like having experienced like this single motherhood, and I'm like, how do they do it? How did they do this before by themselves? And I don't know if any generation has had it like us, where we've had to be these working women as well as these super moms, as well as these super business, like all the roles and the caps we have to play and wear. And we don't have time to create support systems for ourselves. So I just want to bring it back to like good old kitchen table, grandma, aunties, the village. Okay,
yeah.
I want to build a village, right? Because I need a village to help raise me and my children, and I'd like to do the same for other women.